Welcome, everyone, to the Asian Voices Youth Radio podcast, where we discuss all things related to life growing up as an Asian and Pacific Islander Americans. I'm your host, Jonathan Thong, and our special guest joining us today is Howard Xiao. By day, he's a principal partnerships manager for global digital partnerships at Visa, but at night, he's an award-winning poet, speaker, and content creator with a growing social media presence. Hello, Howard, and welcome to the show. How are you today, man?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm doing well.
It's good to hear. So I'm going to ask you something that we ask almost everybody, but we do insist that you tell us a little bit about yourself. How was your life growing up as an Asian American?
Yeah, so just quick background on myself. My parents immigrated to the US from China maybe 30 years ago, and I was born in Michigan, grew up there until I was 3, and then we moved to the San Francisco Bay Area and have been there ever since. And I think for my story as an Asian American, it's very similar to a lot of Asian American stories. I think being in a school, for instance, that maybe didn't have as many Asians, or in some instances had Asians, but everybody was stereotyped or typecast into one bucket, right? Of, not good at sports, not cool, nerdy, those types of things.
Loves anime, all that stuff.
Loves anime. Yeah, exactly. You're just kind of typecast, right? And you don't really have any, other ways to get around it. So I think there's a little bit of that. And obviously, like, growing up Asian American had its challenges. It means, especially and specifically, having parents that immigrated from a different country, that was a whole different layer of challenges, right? Because I think, like, being second generation means that your parents are going to tell you how the American culture works, right? So when you go back home at night, you're exposed again basically back to Chinese culture and not to American culture. And so things that should be obvious to most American kids are not obvious to us, right? Things like, what TV shows are good to watch, or what brands are good to wear, and how you should approach making friends in American society versus, being in China. Like, and potentially, like, in China, it's like a good thing to be good at academics, maybe. And in America, it's like the complete opposite. It's like, oh, you're a nerd, you're weird, I don't want to talk to you, right? So there's a lot of those kinds of small things that I think people don't really, outside of the Asian American community, don't really think about a lot, unless they've had immigrant parents themselves that, haven't really grown up here.
Yeah, no, you saying that kind of just really hit me. Like, you're right. Like, going to school was kind of a different experience because it was a very heavily American culture. You're with a bunch of other people. Just like you, I didn't grow up in a very Asian populated town.
Yeah.
So I get what you mean, especially when coming back home and then you see that there's such a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think by that standard Asian American challenge that you said that a lot of us experience, you basically mean that we're growing up in an environment where we're kind of having to live in both worlds, and we're not really knowing how to balance,
to bridge the gap.
Really because it's like, this is my home. I'm supposed to be acting how my family is acting, how my family behaves, how they think, and all that stuff. But
totally.
How do you do that but also survive in a world where unfortunately we kind of get picked on for living up to those kind of beliefs? It's really hard.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, also, just to clarify for people who are listening, it's like, when I first came to the Bay Area, right, I was in Richmond and then Hayward. I moved across various cities and towns in the Bay Area. So for those that know the Bay Area, they're like, oh, you grew up in the Bay Area, so like there should be like tons of Asians around you. But funny enough, like there are a lot of pockets and basically micro pockets where schools don't have as many Asians, and it's just seen as more of a minority. That's one thing. But then secondly, even if you, like I was saying earlier, even if you get into a school that is Asian, like you're still the bottom of the totem pole. It didn't matter that there were more Asians there. Like you're still like, the kids that want to bully other kids are going to bully the Asian kid first because they feel like they're the easiest to pick on. And it also didn't help that I was kind of brought into a grade that was higher. I kind of like moved forward in my academic journey
You skipped a
because
grade.
I skipped a grade because I was my birthday's in November, and I'm right at the cutoff for the school year. So my parents decided to put me in the higher grade, which it's just not a great. I'm already short, I'm already skinny, and then on top of that, I'm a year younger than most of my class.
Oh,
so
man.
it just made things even worse. So.
You just checked all the boxes for like, all right, so this kid's skinny, he's short, and he's younger than us.
Yeah.
Perfect target.
Perfect target. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, like that creates so many issues and other things that kind of you carry on for the rest of your life. You kind of have like a chip on your shoulder. I think every Asian American kind of does, because, for me, having experience at like kind of a young age, getting bullied, like most of the time verbally, and then sometimes, very violently and physically, getting bullied, those things stay with you for life. Right. And there's nothing you can really do. I mean, like, people don't even try to really empathize with you, right? Because the story that I have is like, I was basically walking home from school, and there was like a whole group of kids that decided to like say, oh, I like this kid is like just walking by himself, is like easy to bully. And there's some history with these kids. A long time ago, like, or not long time, like a month ago or something, they had like tried to steal drinks from me and my friends. Like, we had like sodas or something, and they like still try to steal drinks from me and my friends. And then I told them off. I was like, guys, like that's not nice, right? Like, don't do that. And they just like walked away then. But then I was by myself that other time, and they decided, oh, now we can take advantage and pick on him. And basically, it was literally in public, right? It was in the middle of the street on the sidewalk, and there's like tons of cars passing by, and everybody's like at a stoplight basically, and these like three kids like jumped me, like I'm on the floor, they push me down, they're kicking me, they're like punching me. Everybody's like, there's like 20 cars at the stoplight, nobody's doing anything, right? It's just kind of like, that's the kind of, things that happen, and people are, oh, just kids bullying each other, like, I'm not going to stop this. Like, I don't understand people that do that,
Yeah, at that point, it's not even a racial thing, which, I mean, for all we know, it could have been a racial thing, but, bullying is just not cool at all, it's honestly. Cool.
Yeah.
And if you see a kid getting attacked by three other kids, come on.
Yeah.
So I am so sorry you had to go through that, man.
Yeah.
I've never been through like physical bullying, but I have been through a lot of verbal bullying. As you can tell, my last name is, Thong, Thong, to the public. And then growing up in an elementary school with a bunch of kids that have, the most immature sense of humor, I was an easy target just for my name alone. So touching upon that story you had about bullying, I wanted to ask you, you do share a lot of poetry on Instagram about a wide array of things, sometimes ranging from like the importance of mental health to nostalgia for better times. Just like you said earlier, you've even touched upon topics concerning bullying and racial discrimination, especially targeting those of the AAPI community. That story you told me just now, was that the moment or event in your life that stuck with you and pushed you to write about those kind of issues? Or is there a different event and or moment in your life that was the defining moment that pushed you to write about those kind of issues in your poetry?
Mm-hmm. I think there were multiple events. That definitely was one of them. And it's not just childhood bullying, but having experienced just various things, wins and losses, basically, in my life that drove me to write poetry. I think I've been writing poems and just writing for myself for ever since elementary school even, but it didn't really become something that I invested in until high school, where I joined basically a competitive speech and debate team in high school that really got me into performing. And as I performed speeches, I also started to incorporate some of my poetry in some of my speeches. But beyond that, I was always just writing for myself until college. And then that's where kind of my interest in performance from high school combined with my interest in poetry and realizing that that was a great forum to continue performing things and expressing myself, where I started going to different slam poetry competitions in college, etc. In high school, I did pretty well in speech. I was the 2010 state champion, California state champion for speech, and
Nice.
I finaled in national tournaments all over the country for a while in high school. So that kind of gave me the confidence to say, I have some ability to speak my mind. And I think poetry was a great outlet for me to do that as I got to
Yeah.
college. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, a quick note about that is, I guess going back to like the stereotypes about Asian Americans, a lot of people think we're not well spoken, or we're not
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
we can't speak loudly, or we don't even speak at all. Like, we're just very like quiet. We mumble to ourselves. We
It's
don't
actually
yeah.
that's such a good observation. It's something that I saw a lot when I was doing competitive speech. I got, because basically the judges for competitive speech are volunteers, parents, and then eventually once you get to higher levels of competition and final rounds and things like that, it's past, judges and coaches, right? But from the parents and from the volunteers that are judging us in the beginning, they tend to say things like, it's just, they don't mean any harm by it, right? But when they gave me feedback on my speech, they're like, wow, you did so well, and oh, I was surprised because I didn't think you'd be such a loud and
Yeah.
energetic speaker as an Asian, right? It's like not common. Is they literally wrote that in my feedback, right?
That is a backhanded comment if I've ever seen one.
It's
a backhanded
right?
compliment.
But they don't mean any harm by it, but that is something that was in the back of their minds. They're like, oh my god, this Asian kid can speak loud. That's surprising to me, right? So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, he's been speaking 3 decibels higher than expected. It's freaking weird.
Yeah.
I honestly applaud you for breaking that stereotype for a lot of the those people that have that expectation that we're just very soft spoken and we don't, speak loudly for ourselves. But something I wanted to ask you is that poetry is one of the oldest art forms in terms of self-expression.
Yeah.
I want to know why you chose poetry as your outlet for spreading your messages out to the world.
I think part of the reason I chose poetry is because as I did speech, it felt like there weren't many other ways in the real world to continue doing speech, competitive speech, like outside of high school, essentially. And poetry, I just walked by it on my campus one day, and there was like, it's called, so I went to school in LA at UCLA, and then they had this event called Word on Wednesdays, which is basically just an open mic for speakers and poets. And when I joined that event, I started realizing, wow, this is exactly, what I want to do. And also at the same time, I was always writing poetry just for myself. I've never really considered performing it until I saw that open mic event on my campus, essentially. So those types of things, it's kind of like serendipity, right? Just happened.
Yeah.
And I saw an opportunity and I said, wow, like maybe this is like my outlet now that I don't have competitive speech from high school. I can use this as a way to express myself and write in the way that I'd like to write. And even in high school, there were kind of foreshadowings of me doing this eventually, because I had a speech coach who was a published author, and he would always critique us writing our speeches. One time I decided to put some poetry into my speech, kind of like as stanzas that would open different sections of my speech. And when I did that, his eyes lit up. He was like, first of all, you're a great poet. For a published author to tell you at 15 or something that you're a great poet is it made me feel good, right?
You're riding on high at that point.
Exactly.
Cloud 9.
Yeah, I was on cloud 9, and it gave me confidence that maybe this is something I should pick up eventually in the future. And so those little things, I think, built on top of each other. And as I went to college and saw the opportunity to do it, I fully immersed myself in it, and it became more and more important to me.
Yeah, honestly, I read some of your poems on your Instagram, which we will plug later. But cartoons and kung flu I read that one, and that really got me, because when you were talking about how you might have to explain this to your children and their grandchildren and so on, that really hit me, because I don't know how I would ever be able to explain that,
Right.
this whole hatred or racial discrimination towards our own kind and our own people, and it's tough. And the whole PTSD line,
Mhm.
that hit me too, because I was thinking, man, I that's a lot for us to have to go through,
Yeah.
And
It
it's
will
tough.
be one of those times we will have to tell our children and grandchildren, and they'll look at us as if we've been through some type of war zone or something, right?
Yeah.
Because this event is almost our version of World War II from the past. It's like this is the thing. It's 9/11 and this and COVID and all of the
Yeah.
attacks on Asians that happened during COVID.
Yeah.
And ironically, at the same time, there's a lot of growth of Asian American representation through movies and films and things like that. At the same time, it's kind of a weird juxtaposition, because you realize how sad it is, all the violence that's happening against Asian Americans and Asians in general, because again, the same concept that we're easy targets to be
Yeah.
attacked. And then at the same time, we're doing great. We're starting to do really good things in Hollywood and in media and in other areas where we're getting more representation over time. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition to live through. And we'll definitely be telling our kids, back
Yes.
in my day,
Back
this
in my day.
happened. Back in my day, right?
Back in my day, Asians had to ask to be superheroes for Marvel just for it to happen.
They had to tweet to Marvel and then have it come back to them 5 years later, and everybody laughs at them.
That's how Asians did it back in the day.
Back in my day,
we demanded for our roles. Honestly, going off of what you said, when you and I actually spoke on the phone the other day, we talked about how important it was to have proper representation for the members of the AAPI community in media today. Totally. And it actually really does. As of this year and last year, it really does seem we've been getting closer to that goal every day. Can you share further thoughts about that you have on that with us on the podcast?
Yeah, I actually wrote a poem about this a while back when Simu first got the role for Shang-Chi, and it was really moving to me that we can get our own version of Black Panther. Basically, that's how I was thinking about it. And it's just the fact that we can be represented. It means a lot, because I think kids are very shallow, I think, when we're growing up, right? And I can just imagine the moment that was announced, I instantly imagined me as a 7-year-old kid back in school, elementary school, and then telling all my friends, hey, I'm a superhero now. And they would no longer, it's not that the other kids would no longer bully me or something, but it would help a lot, right? Because it's like, I'm relevant again, and I'm cool again, and I'm no longer going to be someone that you just define as one stereotype and outcast me, right? I have something to latch onto. And that's basically what it gives kids, is it gives kids hope. And like, as funny as that sounds, it actually makes a huge impact on kids when they're growing up and building those memories for the rest of their lives, right? I still have all my memories from my childhood that really shook me to my core and made me who I am today. If these types of things happened and gave me confidence, it would have probably changed the trajectory of a lot of things for me and made me even, in some ways, I could say maybe even happier. Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe the struggle was worth it. But yeah, you never know.
I mean, yeah, I agree. Same thing with me in my childhood. I didn't have. If we had Shang-Chi years ago when we were growing up as kids, because growing up I was made fun of because there weren't a lot of Asian superheroes and anything sort of like that. As a kid, I was always compared. I don't know if you ever saw that Disney movie, but it had Brenda Song in it, Wendy Wu, Homecoming Warrior.
Oh, I think I remember that.
Brenda Song, great actress, great person, love her. That movie caused me to get bullied a lot, because anytime I would try to fight back, those kids would say, oh, what are you going to do, Wendy Wu, Homecoming Warrior? And I'm like, two things. One, That was a good movie. It was very fun. 2, I'm a guy. I don't know why you're calling me a girl. This is some weird power play you're doing thing here. That sucks.
Oh, I actually, yeah, I'd love to talk about that too. I think it's one of those things, assuming that Asian guys are not masculine. That is a stereotype I really despise, and definitely is another connection to the point that we're easy targets, right? Especially as Asian guys. It also resulted in less confidence as you grew up when it came to the dating scene and things like that too, because you started thinking, first of all, you don't have any confidence because society has always told you that you're not a man. And secondly, I think females that may have been interested in the past, like they might not have been interested after thinking about the stereotype, right? And there's so many things to be said on that front as a millennial, having gone through kind of the dating process.
Yeah, no, don't even get me started on the whole dating scene, man. Oh my god,
we'll go on for like 10 hours or something.
Yeah, like we would need an entirely new podcast series just to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I think there's a bunch of other Asian YouTuber guys that probably talk about that stuff. Yeah. But for us, we're just speaking about it in terms of the fact that this whole racial discrimination thing has, without a doubt, affected our lives in many different aspects and stuff.
Exactly.
And honestly, if we had, I hate to keep, well, actually, I don't hate this. I love praising Shang-Chi. If we had Shang-Chi as a kid and my bully saw that movie, I would say, oh, okay, what, you're going to call me Shang-Chi? He was a badass.
Yeah.
What? If you're going to compare me to Shang-Chi, I'm taking that as the biggest praise ever. And I'm walking on cloud 9 as a kid,
Yeah. Do you have 10 rings that make you like a superpowered being? Yeah, screw you.
Oh, my God. So finally, I've actually heard that you've been asked to participate as a poet in the Chinese New Year Media Project for the 123rd annual Golden Dragon Parade that was supposed to schedule to air on the NBC4 morning show. It's also going to be live streamed on its Facebook page, which I heard has over 1 million followers. I got to ask you, how are you feeling about that? And what kind of poems are you going to be sharing on that live stream?
Yeah, I am super excited for that. It was total serendipity because Alexa Khan, who is one of the board of directors for the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in LA, she reached out to me through Instagram, and so some part of me is just like amazed that happened. And without me having reached out to her, she just saw me through a couple of hashtags that I had put my poems in and realized that it might fit the program. And it was an incredible experience. It was really fast. It took like maybe I had basically a day and a half to write the poem. So to answer your question, I wrote a poem specifically for this event, and it's connected to a animation, like a 2D animation that the production team is putting together, and also connecting to Asian American history, talking about things like the Chinese Exclusion Act, where the origin of the word chink came from, and those types of things. Like I cover a lot of very key points in Asian American history and reminds us of all the struggles we went through to give us hope that we can overcome the struggles that we have today, right? Especially with the Asian American violence and things of that nature. We've overcome a lot of discrimination in the last 3 centuries, etc. And it's something that is truly a part of our history, overcoming the struggle. And we should be proud of who we are and how we've been able to come together in many different ways. And reminding people of that hopefully drives more activism, drives even more representation in media. Those are the types of messages I want to send to the Asian American community and empower us. So I'm really excited for the event. It's one of the first televised poetry event I've done. So it's going to be a really great thing for me. But I also think it's something, more importantly, I think the message that is going to be sent is going to be really powerful for everybody to listen to. So yeah. And I also was able to perform with Maral, who's a great singer. She's like she's a singer that was invited to sing at the Walt Disney Hall and the Carnegie, I think the Carnegie Hall as well, like all over the place and around the world. So I wrote, it was the first time I wrote a little bit of a chorus that would fit with the poem. It's going to be pretty cool. It's something that most people don't do in spoken word, right? They don't combine music very well with poetry, and I think this might be one of those times that it'll work out and look really good. So
yeah, you're heading into the music scene now, huh? Yeah.
Well, I do have a couple of friends who are in music and do production. I mean, one of my friends, Anish, Aniche, like he and I have always been thinking about the music space and supporting our various Asian American cultures, he being Indian American and me being Chinese American, right? So, working it doesn't matter what type of art, but using art as a way of expression and to represent your ethnicity, I think ends up being a really powerful vehicle for spreading a message.
Yeah, that's true. I'm excited to hear what you have to say, and I'm excited to see the chorus you're going to be showing on that thing. Quick question: what date and time will this air on TV, and where can other people watch it if not on television?
I believe it'll be airing on Saturday, February 12th at 11 a.m. And it should be live on NBC's morning show and social media. I think it's NBC4. And there's a couple of other social media outlets and media outlets that will be carrying it. I think KTLA as well in LA.
Okay. All right. Well, that's really exciting. I wish you a lot of luck, man. You're going to do great. You're going to kill it. If you kill it on this episode, I know you're going to kill it on that live show. We once again thank our guest Howard for joining us today.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you bringing me in, and it was a great time. And I think we covered a lot of ground on how it feels growing up as an Asian American, and also how that should, in a sense, empower us to do more for our Asian American community. But yeah, really appreciate you having me on.
To learn more about Howard, please visit his Instagram. It's at hxthepoet. If you have any suggestions for future guests or topics, we'd love to hear from you guys. Also, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Asian Voices Radio is produced by Asian Culture and Media Alliance, a nonprofit that empowers our AAPI community with a voice through media arts. If you would like to support our program and make a donation, please visit asianvoicesradio.com. Thank you guys for listening. I'm Jaws Thong. Please join us next week for another exciting and thought-provoking Asian Voices Radio show. Take care until then, everyone.